Okay,
All right.
I will call to order this hearing. What is today? June 8th, 2023, in the matter of an appeal of Z0032-23-D, application by Mount Meadows for a hotel. This is separate from the River and Stream Conservation Area appeal for the same project, which we will hear after this one. But my name is Joe Turner. I'm the county's hearings officer. My role as the hearings officer is conduct the hearing and make decisions about certain land use applications in Clackamas County. In making those decisions, I'm required to apply the county's existing laws. I am not a policymaker. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. If you think that the laws need to be changed, you can work with Planning Commission and Board of Commissioners to do that. But state law requires that this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings officer, I provide an unbiased decision maker. I believe I am unbiased with regard to the application before me today. The appeal. I have not had any pre-hearing contact with any of the parties regarding the substance of the application or appeal, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or any surrounding properties. That anyone has the right to challenge my impartiality, to argue that I'm biased in one way or another, and you can do that when it's your opportunity to testify. Procedure will follow. I will ask staff to summarize their staff report, copies of which are available on the county's website. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their proposal and respond to the appeal. Then the appellants will have an opportunity to present their appeal, respond to the testimony from the applicant and staff. If anybody else wants to testify about this application and appeal in support, in opposition, or with questions, they may do so. Actually, the applicant has appeal as well, so they can do their appeal initially with their initial intro. Anyway, once everyone's had an initial opportunity to testify, I will give staff and the applicant only an opportunity to respond to the testimony that was offered. If those responses include new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence. Otherwise, I'll close the public portion of the hearing and announce what I'm going to do. Anyone with an interest in this application may offer relevant oral or written testimony. The testimony should be relevant to the applicable approval criteria, which are set out in the staff report. Also, please don't repeat testimony offered by yourself or earlier witnesses. Repeating your testimony doesn't make your case any stronger. This is not a popularity contest. Whether everybody loves it or everybody hates it is not an issue I get to consider. The only issue before me is whether the application does or does not comply with the applicable approval criteria. It is important that you make your best case to me. My decisions are final for purposes of the county, but may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA. However, LUBA generally will not allow new testimony and evidence on appeal. They'll decide any appeal based on the record before me. So if you feel it's important that myself or any future decision maker knows something about this application, you need to make sure that gets into the record before me. In order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me. If you feel you need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or continue the hearing. If I hold the record open, you'll have an opportunity to submit additional written testimony and evidence before I make a decision. If I continue the hearing, we can come back and do this again at a later date. But whether or not the hearing is continued or the record is held open for any other purpose, state law requires that I hold the record open for an additional week for the applicant alone to submit a final written argument without any new evidence. The applicant can waive that right if they choose, but if anybody wants me to hold the record open for for other purposes or to continue the hearing, you must make that request before the close of the hearing today. Also, my decision, I must issue a written decision within 150 days after this application was filed, so there's some limit to how long I can continue the hearing or hold the record open if anybody requests that. When you testify, please begin by stating your name. Please spell your last name so I get it right, although most people's full names appear on my screen right now. Sometimes when when you pop up on the screen, it cuts it off, but please spell your last name so I get it right. If you represent someone else, please say so. I would please begin by stating your name and your full mailing address as well. Oh, I forgot to say, this is an appeal of planning director's decision. I am required to provide a de novo hearing, which means I'm not allowed to give any weight to the planning director's decision. I'm required to make an entirely new decision, and the applicant continues to bear the burden of proof on all applicable approval criteria. But that concludes my introduction. Mr. Blessing, you want to give us the how-to with Zoom and then your staff report?
Will do. Thank you much.
Mr. Hearings Officer, if I could ask two questions beforehand. I saw,
Sure.
sorry to cut you off, Ben, Mr. Lessing. The first is
this is Mr. Tromke, just for the record, in case somebody's listening to this and doesn't have the video.
Sorry, Ed Tromke, attorney for the applicant. The applicant does not have an appeal. I think I heard you say that the applicant has an appeal pending. We don't in here.
Okay, thank you.
Well, no problem. And then the second piece is I want to make sure that I understood the natural resources wetlands appeal is going to be a separate hearing immediately following this.
That's my understanding, because they are set. Yeah, and yes, I have two.
So we will rearrange our order of presentation a little bit, but other than that, thank you very much for clarifying.
You're welcome. Thank you for the questions. Go ahead, Mr. Blessing.
Okay, thank you. This public hearing will be conducted virtually using the Zoom platform. Panelists for today's hearing, which include the hearings officer, county staff, and the applicant, have both audio and video capability. Audience members who have joined the meeting will have their mics muted unless they wish to testify, in which case they will be called upon to do so by the county staff moderator. Audience members' video will not be turned on at any time. Today's hearing is being recorded as required by law. The county will make every effort to post the recording on the county website later today. There is a designated time during the hearing when it will be open for testimony. The hearings officer will make it clear when this is. If you want to provide testimony, you will utilize the raise hand feature. For attendees on PC and iPad, you have a raise hand button on the Zoom bar. That's the top or bottom, depending on the device. When the moderator switches you over to provide testimony, your screen will look different for a while. Primarily, you will see all participants' cameras, not just the one who is speaking. Staff will call upon you when it is your time for you to provide testimony. Be sure to provide your name and mailing address when you begin. Once you have provided your testimony, your mic will be muted and your screen will be returned to normal. If the record is left open at the end of this hearing and you wish to submit additional written testimony, email written testimony to bblessing@clackamas.us or mail it to Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division, 150 Beaver Creek Road, Oregon City, Oregon, 97045. The staff contact email address is also available on the webpage where you found the Zoom link for today's hearing. Testimony must be received by 4 p.m. on the day the record closes. People who testify and provide their mailing address will receive a copy of the hearings officer written decision. If you do not wish to testify but would like to receive the decision, you must provide your email or standard mailing address, 1, by email to the staff contact for the application, or 2, by entering it in the Zoom chat function during the hearing. That concludes my script, and I will go into a brief staff summary and presentation. Let me share my screen here. Okay, oops. Okay, my name is Ben Blessing. I'm a senior planner with Clackamas County Planning. This is an appeal of planning director's decision for Z0032-23-D. That's for design review, what's called the Government Camp Hotel. Just to echo Mr. Turner's note on the files, Z0033-23-RSCA is going to be commenced after the close of this hearing. So just another note there. So briefly, this is a vicinity map You can see it's in the Government Camp Urban Unincorporated Community. Government Camp Loop is actually state jurisdiction, ODOT. I'll cover that just briefly on subsequent slides. But you have the subject property surrounded by the condominiums here you see on the south, and then to the north, directly north of the site is the USA land. There's a thin strip of land adjacent to and north of the subject property. This is just a rough outline. And you know, obviously north of it, you have the larger land. Just a site plan. I'll have more slides that'll just kind of briefly go over the renderings just for reference and like meeting the building elevations and so forth. But as you can see here, again, you have a hotel, you have under structure parking on part of it. You have parking that goes off the site and utilizes much of the space, as will be discussed. And well, the site is constrained with a creek, and obviously the structure and the development is being pushed as far north as possible. You have frontage improvements proposed on Government Camp Loop, right where there's actually road frontage. Again, the USA lands aren't road frontage. So just a couple of highlights. A 47-room hotel with amenities including a spa, sauna, game room, bike and ski storage area in the basement. Again, under structure parking is proposed to meet the minimum parking requirements. I guess with the design review, there's some special architectural features that have been noted in the staff decision, section 1005.12. In particular, there's some wrought iron and stone elements on the facade and so forth. So you have basically some elements that are going to be specific to Government Camp. There's a restaurant and dining area to be used for the hotel guests only, and the hotel not to be used for residential occupancy. Government Camp Loop ODOT jurisdiction and frontage. Government Camp Loop is in the Oregon Department of Transportation's jurisdiction, and frontage thereon will be improved with pedestrian amenities. So this is just a quick overview of the basement floor plan. You have, you can see bike parking in the basement, and you have also covered parking here on some of it. And then the main floor, it's it's a hotel, so you have a lobby, a restaurant for the guests, laundry facility, and so forth. This is just a sample of level 2 and 3, just to kind of see that it's a hotel. You have typical rooms. Some of them have kitchenettes, smaller kitchens for, I guess you would say, extended stays, if that's what the applicant cited. But that's pretty typical of some of these resort accommodations. Just a quick building rendering. There will be, obviously, as the staff decision noted, and if subsequently approved, there will be some upgrades to the plaza. In terms of there'll be more landscaping, there'll be design review committee recommended other things which were incorporated into the staff, the planning director's decision, just to make blank walls and so forth be more compatible with the Government Camp standards. Just a summary of the appeals. Mainly, this is just, this will be, discussed by Mr. Turner. So, but just to briefly summarize, the first appellant, Mount Hood Meadows, Oregon LLC, submitted some documentation opining that the strip of land adjacent to and northerly of the subject property is apparently owned by the applicant. I simply refer the hearings officer to the definition of owner, which is pretty straightforward. It defines the ownership as, I believe, fee title or a land sale contract, but that's set forth in section 202. Just the other two appellants made several notations, and I don't need to go over those appeal notices. I still note that the staff decision that was issued by the planning director, I believe still complies with the criteria. I didn't see anything that would change the staff decision at this point. So, and again, that's just, oh, and also there was some concerns with fire access, water supply, and also engineering standards when it comes to circulation and so forth. Just to note, the Hoodland Fire District did submit an exhibit, I believe this week, that discusses fire access and water supply. It's Exhibit 18, just for the record. And then, of course, county engineering provided recommendations on how to meet basically the roadway standards for circulation, that sort of thing. And those are also made part of the record too. So that concludes my presentation, and thank you.
The definition of owner, is it the county's position then that the applicant's not the owner of that strip yet?
I believe, yes, I think that, yeah, unless there's some, the agreement, I'm not an expert at the agreement that was submitted by the appellant, but it seems to me that a typical fee title is like a deed, or your typical land sale contract is my understanding. I say that with a little, I didn't identify that, but I do believe that, yes, you'd have to have a specific fee title or a contract, land sale contract. An agreement, I don't necessarily think counts as ownership.
Okay. That kind of is a follow-up to my next question, which was, if they were the owner, wouldn't they be required to construct frontage improvements along the remainder of the site's frontage?
Yes. Well, yes, and also I believe that would change some of the setback requirements. Well, obviously, if it was a frontage, and let me rephrase that. If it's, I don't believe so. Our engineering department might be able to make a better statement, but if it's actual real property, if it's just real property, I don't know that it would be a front per se. It may just still be real property, but under the definitions, or sorry, under section 317, the zoning code for the mountain recreational residential zone, you lose that setback of 0 on national USA land. So that would be an effect that would possibly change the setback requirements if it was truly a property owned by the appellant. I'm sorry, the applicant.
Yeah. Okay. Then my next question on page 6 of your staff report, there's an architectural rendering of the back of the building. I'm trying to find it on my larger screen. There's a flat spot there. Is that a deck? That's therefore not subject to the roof standard, which requires peaked roof. And how is snow clearance going to occur there?
So page 6, and it's the rear rendering of the
the middle picture there.
Oh, the middle picture. Thank you. And then I'm sorry, could you repeat the question? Or the wrong question?
There's a flat spot in there. Is that just a considered a deck rather than a roof? Which would a roof is, I assume, is subject to the pitched roof requirement. And how would snow removal occur in that area?
Oh, yes. I don't want to say. I'd have to get back to you on that.
It's probably something for the applicant can address, but I just wanted to raise that to see if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, I think the roof line is typically would be the actual roof, and I don't know that for snow load that would count, but I could verify it, or the applicant could.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something they've considered. I just wanted to what the issue is. I guess it's the front. That is the front.
Oh, yeah, that's the front of the plaza.
Yeah. Anyway, my last question was what the 150 days. It's my understanding it was July 10th. They've extended for 14 days, so the 150 days expires on the 24th of July. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I had the right numbers. That was the only questions I had, Mr. Tromke. You want to appear for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Turner, Mr. Hearings Officer. The applicant has.
Can you identify yourself for the record too? Again, just.
I'm Ed Tromke with the law firm of Jordan Ramus. here for the applicant. The address is, 1211 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Suite 2700, Portland.
Thanks.
And we're going to have a couple of folks talking to discuss issues raised by the applicants. The first will
You mean
be
appellants?
Pardon?
You said issues raised by the applicant. Did you mean appellants?
Appellants. Thank you.
I thought so.
And in that regard, I believe that the slide of staff was inaccurate. I'm sorry, Brian. Excuse me, Ben. That the thin strip of property in front of this proposed property is owned by the federal government, and the agreement there for some kind of an exchange is with the appellant, not the applicant. It's
Oh, okay.
okay, and that's the appellant represented by Mr. Drake, who's down at the bottom of my screen. So just to clarify that piece, but as we'll talk about, the facts are that it is not owned by the appellant. It is owned by federal government, and that's the way that is. The first person I want to call is Brian Lessler. Then we'll have who's general contractor and owner's representative. Then we'll have Jim Toporek, the architect, talk about the building. And finally, Jimmy Hoff, civil engineer, will talk about parking and driveway issues that were raised by the appellants. We will save Ivy Watson Natural Resources Wetlands for the next hearing immediately after this. I think that's it for the moment. So let's start with Brian Lessler. If you could unmute, I'm going to mute.
Good morning. Excuse me. My name is Brian Lessler, spelled L-E-S-S-L-E-R. I'm a general contractor with PDG Construction Services. Our office is at 5200 Southwest Meadows Road, Suite 200, Lake Oswego, Oregon 97035 or 34. I always get those confused. Lake Oswego has 2 zip codes.
Yes.
I think it's 34 actually. I was asked to discuss the letter from Hoodland Fire District, which I think Mr. Blessing referred to as Exhibit 18, that was provided by Mr. Scott Klein, who's the division chief and fire marshal for Hoodland Fire District number 74. The reason that we connected with Mr. Klein is that one of the appellants had made a statement that there was inadequate fire protection for the property. I think the letter from Mr. Klein to a great extent speaks for itself, but the statement from the appellant was a bit vague in terms of what is inadequate, but according to Mr. Klein's letter, we have a building that is fully sprinkled or will be fully sprinkled, that will have standpipe facilities, and also because of the topography and grades on the property, there are exceptions that come into place under the Oregon fire codes that will eliminate the need to have the 150-foot perimeter access on the building. In fact, the fire marshal told me he would not want to pull his fire equipment down in behind the building. And his letter simply explains by code reference that the building does have adequate fire protection, and that from the fire life safety review, there would not be any problems from the fire district's standpoint in providing fire protection for the building.
Thank you. What is a standpipe? I think I know, but I just want to make sure my assumption is correct.
It's a fire device that is connected to the fire flow line, which allows the fire department to come on site and connect their hoses and pump equipment to a water source that's immediately adjacent to the building.
What's the water source? What is the water source?
Oh, the water source is the water from the water district.
How, yeah, Mr. Trumke?
The fire district has a water tender truck that can be connected to.
Okay, that's what I thought it was.
Yes,
So they
that's-
connect to the standpipe to that water pumper truck. Does that go into the sprinkler system?
Yes, it feeds into the sprinkler system, and there are
Okay.
pressure valves that make it all work. The engineers about that more than we lawyers do, but it works.
That was my understanding. I just wanted to confirm that I was right. Thank you. Anything else from this witness? I was liking out on your name. Mr. Leffler.
No,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leffler. Mr. Trumke, who is your next witness?
The next witness is Jim Toporek, who is the architect who designed this building, and he's going to talk a little bit about the issues that were raised by the appellants with respect to the building.
Yeah, so project architect with Studio 3 Architecture, Jim Toporek, Toporek. My address, the main office is 275 Court Street, Salem, Oregon, 97301. I can talk a little bit about the building. There wasn't too much on the architectural side from the appellants, is my understanding, but I could talk a little bit about fire safety and construction type. But just to overview the building a little bit, it is 5 stories, 4 stories of wood over 2 levels of concrete construction, and one of those levels is considered a basement, would be underground. As stated, it's 47 hotel units, short-term stay, including studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. Ben did a good job covering the amenities. Parking is in the basement under the concrete structure and to the west of the structure. Yeah, it's a little bit about design. There is design guidelines that we do adhere to. And so we meet those, and I feel show the rustic characteristic that this area is looking for. We have simulated wood, fiber cement, sidings, wood accents, veneer stone base. Massing is broken up by strips of balcony insets. There's an angle to the building, and then we have some relief at the roof with the rooftop terrace. So yeah, we will be meeting all state and local building and fire codes. They will not give us a permit without it. And the building is fully sprinklered. And I believe there's a question about the roof pitch at the ground floor. That
No,
is
it's not so
above-
much the ground floor. It's that, I think you just called it a rooftop terrace. That's what I was
okay.
wondering if that's what that was.
Yes, so yeah, there'd be an
Okay.
occupiable, yep, amenity space, rooftop terrace.
That's what I assumed, but I didn't see a railing, so I just was.
Oh,
Just
sure, yeah,
rendering.
we're using the parapet to meet that guardrail requirement up there.
I figured there would be. I just didn't see it, so I wasn't sure what it was.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's what I have for you.
How's snow removal going to occur on that rooftop patio?
We're still playing with that. We're thinking a radiant heat system
Okay,
and drains.
that's what I figured. Just wanted to ask.
Yeah, of course.
Mr. Trumke, anything else from the applicant?
Yes, we have Jimmy Hoff, the civil engineer, who's going to talk about parking, driveway access, and those issues that have been raised by the appellants.
Hi, all. So I'm Jimmy Hoff, H-O-U-F. I'm a civil engineer here at Harper Hoff Peterson Regelis. We're located at 205 Southeast Spokane Avenue, Suite 200 in Portland, Oregon, 97202. And I'm going to speak a little bit on some of the concerns related to access management, site access, and touch on a little stormwater and water quality elements project are providing. So as mentioned earlier by Mr. Blessing, the jurisdiction of Government Camp Loop is under Oregon Department of Transportation. The project site butts about 165 feet of Government Camp Loop there on the north property line. Given that it's under the Oregon Department of Transportation jurisdiction and we're creating a new access, the project will be required to obtain a state highway approach road permit for the new driveway access, meeting their requirements. The project will also be required to obtain an ODOT miscellaneous permit to construct the required frontage and utility improvements on Government Camp Loop. Related to the access management, there has been back and forth with ODOT to date on meeting these requirements and making sure we're meeting their standards. The project is required to meet the spacing requirements outlined in the Oregon Highway Plan. The minimum required spacing at this location is 250 feet. The project is providing 870 feet to the west and 760 feet to the adjacent driveway to the east. ODOT is also interested in the intersection site distance at this location. The minimum required site distance for a clear triangle required is 445 feet, which is being met at this location. ODOT also will require a minimum 28-foot driveway throat entering and exiting the site to meet the requirements set forth by the Oregon Department of Transportation Highway Design Manual for a commercial driveway. Vehicle movements show that vehicles are able to enter and exit the driveway safely, and a light commercial vehicle 27.5 feet in length is able to access the lower parking area to the west, parking bays, and utilize the 12-foot unmarked parking space for turnaround to help facilitate that turnaround. Related to stormwater management, the project will be meeting the Clackamas County Water Environmental Services standards. Even though this is in unincorporated Clackamas County, they still follow the same Water Environmental Services standards, and also will be meeting the National Marine Fisheries Services SOAP 5 requirements that are triggered by environmental impacts. The project will meet the water quality standards by providing clean water leaving the site with filtered cartridge catch basins in the right of way, and an on-site water quality filter vault containing cartridges as well. The project will be reducing overall peak flows back into Camp Creek by providing an on-site 48-inch detention pipe under the outdoor parking area, and will install a flow control manhole to control the flows leaving the detention pipe back into Camp Creek. The existing 18-inch culvert, which is collecting runoff from the north side hillside and ditch of Government Camp Loop, will be redirected just to the east and discharged back into Camp Creek as it does today. And just want to note that the project will be installing erosion control measures and have those in place prior to construction, during construction, to prevent the pollution and disturbance into the Camp Creek tributary. That is all from me.
Thank you, Mr. Huff.
Mr. Hearings Officer, could I ask Mr. Lessing, has the submission from Mr. Hoff earlier this week been received and put in the record?
I got it. So yes.
And do you know what exhibit number it is? Is it 19 or 20 maybe?
So I'm sorry, that's for the access letter.
Yeah,
It's gonna be exhibit 19.
thank you very much.
Weren't there two submittals,
Yeah,
Mr. Huff?
Oh, sorry.
yeah. The other is a wetland, and we will refer to that with
Okay.
next hearing.
I think it had the D number rather than the RSCA number on it, but that's okay. Well, they are both in the record for the various applications.
Thank you. Let me just make sure. Yeah, so we're good with that, and with that, I think we can just say that the water quality is all addressed, as much of it as is in this hearing was addressed by Mr. Hoff. The turn radiuses that were mentioned are all fine for the sizes of trucks that will be serving this facility. And they are on the back pages of Exhibit 19. There are several different turn radiuses for the parking lot. Otherwise, as the staff report says, all the design guidelines are met. And there was one other fire question that was raised. And as our architect said, that the simulated wood exterior is fire retardant, fire proof to the extent that's required in a forest zone. So we have satisfied all of the concerns that the appellants have raised. And so at this point, I think we will rest our evidentiary part. And we'll save time for rebuttal, Mr. Hearings Officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so everybody knows, the email I got identifies the one you just referred to with the turning radii as Exhibit 19. It identifies the other memo as Exhibit 20 for this project, but I understand that that's intended for the other one. We'll clarify that on the record for the other one. And we'll see what maybe changing, if staff needs to change the exhibit number.
Thank you, Mr. Hearings Officer.
Okay, is that it for the applicant then? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, we're ready.
I have a raised hand from Mr. King, Neil King.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, Neil King, spell my last name King. My address is 1475 Horseshoe Curve, Lake Oswego, Oregon, 97034. And I have been a owner of Collins Lake Resort condominium or chalet for almost 19 years this coming September. I want to make it known to all the individuals on this that I am not against development. Obviously, from purchasing a place up there, I look forward to due diligence on development. So,
Mr. King, which
yes.
appellant are you representing? The homeowners association? or
I am
the-
representing the homeowners association.
Okay,
Collins Lake
thank you.
Resort. Yes, and I was in the first phase of Collins Lake Resort, so I'm well aware of the entire development process there, and then what has gone on in government camp since then. Two of the three issues that I really want to focus on. One is the parking side that Mr. Hoff just addressed. Parking in government camp, there's two different seasons that you really have to focus on. One is the winter season, the other is the summer season. And in both situations, it's very problematic. In the winter, it's even worse. But one of the things that I wanted to point out, from what I believe we've seen, is the number of parking spaces that are designed for this particular building is 52 spaces for 47 hotel rooms. And that does not include any parking spaces that would be for the use of the restaurant or anybody else that's dropping in to visit. It doesn't include anything for people that have multiple cars. It does not appear to really take care of individuals that are pulling trailers with them, that have a camper van or something like that that's pulling an additional car. And just to give you an idea, in Collins Lake, we have 151 units spread across that development. And each one of those units has 2-car garages to be able to park vehicles in. In addition, there's approximately 75 additional parking spaces that are available externally. And we run into problems in parking. So we have close to 380 parking spaces total for 151 units. And in the wintertime in particular, we have problems with parking. So in this particular hotel, if I believe my numbers are correct, you've got 52 parking spaces for 47 units. And that just means that there is not adequate parking anywhere close to what needs to be necessary. Mr.
But that's
Hoff,
what the
also-
code requires, and I
yeah,
can't require that they provide more than the code requires.
I understand, but one of the things the county will be hearing from a lot of people when it comes to problem in the wintertime, because of the snow accumulation that exists up there. This last year, we probably had snow close to about 8 to 10 feet on the ground.
Mhm.
And when you have the county vehicles out there trying to move the snow around, you've got cars that just get abandoned on the side, and there will be cars and vans and stuff with 3 to 5 feet of snow on top of them that are sitting there for months. So that's the reality of the fact. I understand what the code calls for, but the reality is there's.
But
gonna be a-
I have to apply the code. So
I
I
understand.
can't consider these other issues. There's just
Okay.
nothing in the code that gives me that discretion.
Okay, well, if that's the case, then again, the same thing comes into play when it comes to the fires. So if the parking, yeah, I mean, I guess before I move past the parking,
Mhm.
Mr. Hoff indicated that there's a 12-foot turnaround.
Mhm.
And I believe he said that the vehicles can enter and exit safely with up to 27 feet of vehicle. You know, I believe is what he indicated. I mean, you think about that. You've got cars that are parked in the spaces that are there. There's 52 spaces, and a car coming in that is pulling something and has a 12-foot turnaround. That's impossible. That's just not going to work. And this is not an enter in one side and exit out the other. This is enter in. And what are you going to do? You're going through underground parking, coming off the other end into the open parking area. You're not going to be able to turn that vehicle around. And that's the reality of it. Moving into the beyond the parking situation is I understand that there's you mentioned about the fire department approving things. It was only a couple of years ago that we had golden poles that burned down.
You had what?
Golden poles.
That's what I
Chalet.
thought
up
you
in
said. Is
Government
that
Camp.
a commercial? What is that?
That was a condominium development that was
Okay.
in Government Camp. And that was probably about 5-6 years ago, something like that. They, for the most part, do not have a lot of vegetation and trees around them. However, the fire department was not able to get there quick enough to be able to save the building. When I look at this particular structure, you are surrounded on 3 sides by trees and vegetation that are very large. And to hear this morning that the fire department has given its blessing on this thing, all it's going to take is somebody flicking a cigarette off on the back end of that thing into all the trees and the areas. I mean, I know from the schematics, it looks very beautiful and green there with like it's a rolling hill greenery. That is not the case. If you get up there and look, you're talking about trees that are 75 to 150 feet tall, and it's surrounding the whole back end of this thing. And we have already had fire problems. One of the things, the entire Government Camp area has had a difficult time obtaining fire insurance. Collins Lake Resort, we went through a process about 3 years ago. Our ISO rating was so high that we ended up going to Lloyd's of London. I believe that there was approximately 30 some carriers that declined to offer fire insurance.
That's something the applicant's going to have to deal with as well, but it's not an issue I get to consider whether they can get fire
Okay,
insurance.
but it does come into play that if somebody does, I mean,
Mhm.
as a homeowner up there, I'm very concerned because
No, I understand
this
that
thing
concern.
happens-
It's a reasonable
this
concern.
happens to everybody in Government Camp. You know, whatever happens there, just like in the state of California, you already have situations where State Farm and other carriers have just announced in the last week that they are no longer issuing policies in the state of California.
I
The
understand.
same will apply up here.
Yep,
So,
but it's something the applicant will have to deal with. It's not something I can.
but if the
condition
applicant gets
or deny.
approval, then that comes back and affects everybody in Government Camp And the county is the one that's going to have to be addressing this. So I do think that you guys do have responsibility to help represent the people up in government camp, because we are being affected by this as well. You know, and then the third item here is that when it comes to this mixed use, I mean, it's being sold to the general public as a hotel, but with an extended stay up to 30 days. Question number one is, how do you even police that? Number two, you've got, as already pointed out by the applicant, you have 3 different types of rooms. You've got studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms with full kitchens. And we already see this happening frequently in the government camp area, where people are staying for months and months and months. And, you know, we've also heard from the applicant that had an individual at the CPO meeting that Jesus Solis mentioned to us on May 12th, that Vacasa is going to be housed in their building, and that is going to be a business enterprise as well in there. So you look at that, you look at a restaurant. I don't know if it's pointed out, but I believe I've heard that the restaurant is close to 2,000 square feet. And a 2,000 square foot restaurant, I mean, all of us have gone to Days Inn and other restaurants out there that is a small little room for, I mean, if you only have 47 applicants or 47 units, a 2,000 square foot restaurant, how is that going to be policed as well? So I just bring these things up as being, you know, I don't want to, I want to cast doubt on what is the true intent here, because it does affect everybody in the government camp area. I'm not against development. I'd love to see something in there if it's a smaller unit, but what is being proposed is going to cause a lot of problems: wintertime parking, summertime, the fire areas, and then the mixed use areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Is there anybody else? The other appellant represented? I understood there was 2 appellants. If so, please raise your hand is what I'm asking, so we can call on you for testimony. Or
Yes,
is there-
Mr. Hearing's officer, my name is Matthew Drake. I'm the
Thank you.
chairman, CEO of Mountain Meadows, and I am present.
and you're representing Mount Hood Meadows?
Mount Hood Meadows, Oregon LLC, address 1639 Northwest Northrop Street, Portland, Oregon 97209.
Aren't you the applicant, not an appellant?
No, the appellant, sir.
Okay. My staff report identifies the applicant as Mount Hood LLC too.
That is
Mr.
incorrect.
Bless- That's what I thought. Okay, thank you. That's where I was confused. Go ahead, Mr. Drake.
Well, I won't reiterate the written testimony per your prior request, but I would ask if you have, for the record and for the group today, the correspondence that was sent by the United States Forest Service, that you could provide a summary for the record.
Mr. Blessing, is that in the record? I don't know off the top of my head.
Yes, it's in the record.
Okay. I'm not sure off the top of I have looked at everything in the record, but I'm not sure exactly what, I couldn't give you a summary off the top of my head, but it is part of the record and I will consider it.
Mr. Blessing, can you provide a summary of that?
I just echo what Mr. Turner said. I can read the initial statement you prepared. Would that help?
If you prefer.
Okay. Is that's okay, Mr. Turner? The
Sure.
appellant may just, it's a brief paragraph.
Sure.
Just one sec, please. There we go.
And what
Here-
what exhibit number is the Forest Service memo?
Oh, sorry, it would be Exhibit 12, 18 pages.
Oh, that's their that's Mount Hood LLC appeal. What is the Forest Services memo? Is that in there?
Well, Yes, that's basically, it starts on page 3 and it's what's, I guess I could, if it's
So that's
okay.
the
I could-
exchange agreement.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
about this strip and, okay, got it.
Yeah. So it says, it's addressed from MBD Development Manager, Mount Hood Meadows, Oregon, OREG LLC. Dear Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division, Mount Hood Meadows, Oregon LLC, and the U.S. Forest Service have entered into a binding exchange agreement involving the parcel immediately adjacent to and north of the subject parcel. See attached. Accordingly, all zoning and other required approvals for the development of the subject property should be applied in a manner that acknowledges the private property interests in the adjacent parcel. The approvals at issue include required setbacks and appropriate site access. Signed, Matthew B. Drake. So I guess just one other item to note, the agreement can be read. I would just again refer to ownership as defined in ZDO section 202.
Okay.
It's the appellant's position, Mr. Hearing's officer, that this is an encumbrance, black letter agreement encumbrance encumbering the subject property as confirmed by the U.S. Forest Service. And we respectfully request that you consult with Clackamas County Attorney Stephen Madker, who's quite familiar with this congressionally mandated land exchange, on the legal nature of this issue.
I can't consult with anybody outside of this process. So if there's some legal argument that needs to be made, you can ask them to present that or present it yourself. But it's not, I can't go out and talk to Mr. Madcore outside of this hearing. If he wants to appear and provide such testimony, I can consider it or written. But it's not
Well,
something I can consider.
I did suggest that to him. That's up to him to do, but I just wanted to make sure that my testimony today, which I've just offered, is in the record that I suggested that you confer with Clackamas County legal personnel.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. So, Mr. Drake, I just want to make sure I understand what you're arguing is that because Mount Hood LLC owns the strip, we'll call it, in front between the west portion of the frontage between there and the site and the road, that therefore those because it's not Forest Service land anymore, the setbacks apply and the building is too close.
No, sir, that's not correct.
Okay, what is your argument then?
What is correct, and the fact is the property is owned by the United States Forest Service pending a land exchange mandated by Congress. Part of that process, part of that legal process, as dictated by federal law, requires and has required the exchange participant, which is Mount Hood Meadows, Oregon LLC, and the United States Forest Service, to enter into a binding exchange agreement, which was provided to you. That has been completed. It was a year ago and so forth. That exchange is now waiting for the result of outstanding litigation as well as further federal process for congressionally mandated land exchanges. And because of the legal nature of this, both state and federal, this is why I suggested that Mr. Madker consult with you or vice versa.
How does that exchange affect this application? That's the link I'm missing.
Once with this encumbrance on the property should be viewed as private land, which then affects the setbacks.
Okay, that's what, yeah, I was summarizing more, but
yes.
Okay, so it does, the issue, your argument is that it affects setbacks.
Correct, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Jeff Koffenberg?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Turner. Thank you. Jeff Koffenberg, last name Kaufenberg. Address
you.
3145 Oak Crest Drive, Forest Grove, Oregon, 97116.
And are you appearing on behalf of yourself or as representing one of the appellants?
Representing Grand Lodges at Collins Lake Resort condominiums. I am the president of that organization. And a lot of what I was going to speak about has already been brought up by Mr. King and by Mr. Drake. So I'm just going to summarize a couple of quick questions for you. Throughout the application, this project's been called an extended stay hotel. I couldn't find anything in the ZDO defining an extended stay hotel.
Okay.
Is there anything in Clackamas County that,
No, but Clackamas County Code does limit the hotels and motels to 30-day max, no more than 30-day occupancy. So an extended stay hotel couldn't be more than a 30-day occupancy.
okay. And then the second question would be, you talking about parking requirements. Does Clackamas County differentiate between a snow zone and a non-snow zone parking area?
I don't believe so, but I'll ask Mr. Blessing. And I'll do that once I've gone through everybody else's testimony, we'll give the county a chance to respond.
Let's see. I guess that's all of my addition at this point.
Thank you, sir. Is there, Mr. Kaufenberg, if you'll click on the raise your hand button, your hand will go away so we know you've testified. Is there anybody else who wants to say anything about this application who's not had a chance to do so? Please click on the raise your hand button now.
I don't, can I interject
Yeah,
just
Mr.
one
Blessing.
thing? I got an email from Mark Siegel, who's an attendee, or that's what it's been placed as an attendee.
Uh-huh.
I don't know that, you know, the attendees need to raise their hand to speak, but so I
Yes.
don't know if that's, I think that I would just give him a chance to raise a
Yeah,
hand.
Mr. Siegel, if you wanted to testify, I understand you submitted an email, which I will consider. There we go. Yes, he does want to testify. Thank you, Mr. Siegel. Can we unmute him? There, you're unmuted.
Okay, hi.
Sure,
Um,
gotcha.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the following hearing, the one to come
Okay.
right. This one. But I just, I want to be able to see myself on the screen and I'm and I can't. And I'm just wondering why not? Will I be able to?
Can we promote him to a panelist?
What's that?
I'm asking staff if we can promote you to a panelist, which would
Ah.
make that happen.
Is he an appellant or an applicant?
Yeah, that's what I was just.
You
Which
filed an
appellant are you
appeal?
representing?
I'm an appellant and I filed an appeal and I'm representing myself.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought maybe I wasn't sort of included because my appeal is with the other matter.
Oh, with the RSCA permit?
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay, so in that hearing, you will be on the video. But for this one, since you're not an applicant or an appellant.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
won't.
but you can go ahead and testify, Mr. Siegel.
Good, thank you.
Did you want to offer any testimony, Mr. Siegel?
No,
Okay.
none of this.
Okay, thank you. So we'll see you at the next hearing.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything about this? Oh, there we go. Pamela Pliska. I thought I'd seen your name before, but it went away. Or your raised hand, rather.
Yes. I would like to,
Can I get your name and address for the record?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Pamela Pliska, Pliska. My address is 4111 Southwest 57th Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97221. And I am.
And which appellant are you appearing for?
I am the treasurer and homeowner of the Grand Lodges.
Grand Lodge, thank you.
Okay. So the parking requirements for this quote unquote hotel, I believe honestly with I'm not sure how they're planning on regulating the extended stay so that we don't have people staying over 30 days. They have not, I haven't heard any testimony how they're planning to regulate that. What is to prevent someone from, just making multiple reservations consecutively? These units are built more like condominiums rather than hotels. And as a result, I think the parking regulations that should be adhered to is that of condominiums rather than a hotel. We are all very, very concerned about the parking and the traffic and the, just from where my husband and I have been owners of the Grand Lodges since its inception. And the traffic and the parking along government, the Loop Road is terrible in the summer and the winter. And I just don't see that the parking that they're providing is going to be adequate for the people that they're going to draw into this place. And I think that that needs to be looked at further.
Okay.
I'm not sure how the county's planning on regulating it. Are you going to only have the applicant self-regulate? Is the county going to have any monitoring systems in place to verify the activity going on at this facility? Additionally, how are they going to regulate that only hotel, quote unquote, guests utilize the restaurant? How is that going to be regulated and monitored? So they're not going to service anybody who walks into that restaurant. How are they going to tell? Are they going to require? I don't know what they're going to do, but these are all very open-ended, just logistical questions that, they say one thing, but I just don't see how they're going to be monitored adequately. I think that they're going to draw people who are going to stay long-term, more than 30 days via repetitive reservations. And that's a huge concern of mine.
Okay, and I'll ask the applicant to address that.
And where are they going to park before they go into, where are people who are coming to the restaurant that maybe aren't, where are they going to park? They're going to park on the road, Government Loop Road. We already have a huge parking issues in the summer and the winter there.
Yeah, I understand.
So
when you're saying where are they going to park with the restaurant, you mean people who aren't guests of the hotel?
correct.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
How are they going to prevent?
Right, I understand.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
I'll ask the
Those are my
applicant.
concerns.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there, I got two more raising. Ms. Piska, can you click on the raise your hand so that goes away? And then Mr. King, you had another comment?
I do. Thank you very much. 3 items. Number one, I failed to mention, I am secretary on the board of directors for the Collins Lake Resort, have been for many years. Two issues we've touched on the parking, but one of the things I don't believe has been brought up is what are they doing about employee parking for this hotel? With the number of spaces that they've allocated there, I'm just going to guess they're going to have probably a minimum of 10 to 15 employees of the hotel, not including the Bay Casa that we've also heard from Jesus saying that Solis that is going to be housed there. So that potentially right there, you may end up with 20 plus vehicles that are having to park somewhere. Are they going to be parked in the hotel parking lot, or are those going to be out on Government Loop Road area? As just mentioned, the county is already facing up in the Government Can area, the whole parking situation up on the northern end, all the way down to the southern end.
I understand that.
And this will just add to it. But
Mhm.
then if you combine what was just mentioned about summertime parking and the fire dangers, if you've got vehicles lined up there If, in particular, anybody with a motorhome or campers or pulling trailers, to get the fire department, even though it's close by there, to get them to be able to gain access into that area is going to be almost impossible. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Is there anybody else who wants to say anything about this application or appeal rather? Checking the attendees, make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay, I'm not seeing any more raised hands. Mr. Blessing, you have any response from the county?
Sure. So just made a few notes. First, I think there was concern about the snow zone and snow removal. So I've briefly looked at the ZDO, and particularly in ZDO section 317, there is mention of, I don't see any snow removal requirements. There's only standards for contiguous buildings. There's snow slide areas where the snow comes off the pitch, presumably. There's a standard for that. I didn't see, and I'm just doing this quickly, I didn't see really anything for ZDO section 1005 requiring snow removal specifically, and I haven't looked at section 1005.12, which is the government camp standard specifically, but I didn't see any actual requirements there. Just, you know, doing a quick search for snow removal, that sort of thing.
Is this regarding snow on their outdoor deck, on the roof deck?
Well, this would just, I think the question was just snow removal in general. Is that how I understood the appellant's concern? And it would, so I don't see that there's any, just from a ZDO standpoint, I'm not seeing any specific criteria on like what the standards are to remove snow. There's some standards for, you know, if there's snow removal areas and subdivisions and so forth, there may be requirements for like new subdivisions for snow removal areas for you know, consolidating the snow. But
Somewhere to put the snow you removed.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I just, from a just quick glance, I'm not seeing anything that's applicable in section 1005 or section 317.
I'll look at those in
Yes.
detail before I make my decision. Is there a different standard for parking requirements in a snow zone? That was another question.
Oh, I didn't see any. I looked at 1015. If you could just hang tight.
1015?
Yeah, sorry, 1015.
Yeah.
Is the parking, and I'm not seeing anything. I would, if you could just verify that in your decision, Mr. Turner, but I'm not seeing any specific call out for that unless it's named something other than snow that I'm not seeing here. So.
Okay.
A couple other things. So just to address generally, yeah, the understand the appellant's concerns for monitoring, you know, in terms of monitoring folks coming in that aren't actually guests at the hotel for employee parking, that sort of thing, and how to monitor that, as well as monitoring the restaurant or eating area. I guess the restaurant is shown on the site plan. So there is a condition of approval in the staff decision that requires that it's not an outside restaurant to the general public. Just like any other use, if the applicant or the property owner or whoever's the operator begins to take on tenants and things like that that are beyond the scope of the approval, there's a process through code enforcement. You're always you always have that option to make a code enforcement complaint, and that code enforcement division will make sure that the staff decision, if approved, or the land use decision, if approved, is being complied with, and also just ZDO criteria in general, as well as other county development standards. So that's an option there if this is kind of address generally the monitoring aspect of it. I think I had, yeah, and as far as parking, I would just echo what Mr. Turner said. We just referenced, I think, table ZDO section 1015, table 1015-1, and it's pretty clear. The county, of course, the right-of-way, again, the public right-of-way is ODOT's jurisdiction, and we wouldn't address on-street parking there through the ZDO. Give me a second here. Yeah, and again, the issue of mixed use has come up. Staff's decision details that, I think pretty clearly, it's not a mixed use building, it's a hotel, and there are amenities with the hotel. So I would just reiterate that. I think that's all I have right now for rebuttal.
Okay, the VRBO or.
Oh.
Yeah, was,
So we have a definition of short-term rentals. I can read that to the group. As far as the interplay between the definition of hotel and short-term rental, not 100% sure on. I'd have to get back to you on that. But as far as I know, I think that in either case, you have a hotel and it's defined, I think, but in both cases, it's less than 30 days.
Yeah.
So that
I understand that issue. That wasn't really my question. That's the appellants testified that they were told that I think it's VRBO, Vacasa, maybe one of those vacation rental.
Yeah.
It was going to have an office in the building. Isn't that a separate use from the hotel? And would be
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
It potentially, yes, very likely could be if it's not incidental to the hotel. I'd have to verify that probably with our director. but
Okay,
it seems
and we'll
like
ask the applicant what their plan is.
Yes,
If that's
yes,
still planned, but
yeah.
okay. I guess it'll depend on what the applicant's response is on that issue, but you want me to hold the record open so you can address
Yeah,
that?
that would be good if just to verify. It might
Okay.
be, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Pliska's hand is back up. Do you have a question? I'm taking testimony.
I
from-
was just wanting to clarify my concern about the snow removal for the open parking lot is where exactly, I know this is probably an ODOT issue, but where exactly is that snow going to be moved to? Where? They're
Right.
going to clear out the parking lot, and where is it going to go?
As it goes now.
Okay.
Because right now it goes, I think it's going to create a huge.
I understand. That's a good question, and we'll ask the applicant to address that. Mr. Tromke, anything further? Any response from the applicant, or who wants to go first, I guess?
Well, on the snow, the code doesn't require an explanation of where the snow is going to go. It's going to be disposed of properly. It can't be from the covered portion of the parking area will not need much snow removal other than when it blows in. The open area, ordinary snow plow removal, that can be made a condition of approval, that the snow removal will dispose of the snow in an appropriate way in compliance with all laws. That's simply not a big issue, and that's a condition of approval we could pretty readily accept. We will want to have a chance to discuss this short-term rental after Mr. Blessing gets a chance to look at
Sure.
it. If he's going to keep the record open on that. But in general, the appellants have raised a number of questions here, but they really haven't put any substantial evidence in the record as to the snow, parking, or access. The appellants, the applicant's response has been put in the record, and they address the turning radiuses, the compliance with the snow removal is not an issue. The parking is good. The access to the street is good. As to the fire code, the same thing. This is not a place for a hearings officer to interpret the fire code. The fire marshal does that and has said that the fire codes are being satisfied, and that is what happens with the fire codes. The approval is the letter from the fire marshal is the only substantial evidence in the record. As to the Mr. Drake testified as to the little strip of land in federal ownership between the property at issue here and the Loop Road. ZDO section 202 defines the owner in two ways. It says the person or persons holding fee title to a parcel, and we know that's the federal government at that point, this point, that's the only evidence in the record. Or a parcel, lot, or tract of land, excuse me, except in those instances when the land is being sold on a contract, the contract purchaser shall be deemed the owner. And this is not a land sale contract. There is a federal exchange agreement that's in the record. It's, I think, in Exhibit 12. And there are substantial contingencies in the record. First, if you look at the date of it, the last page, page 5 of 16 on my numbering system, says that it is dated the 4th of May, 2022. 2 pages prior to that, section 11 says, this exchange agreement is binding until the later of 12 months following execution or non-appealable resolution of any third-party objections. So the document by its terms has expired. May of 2023, it expired, except if there is a non-appealable resolution of a third party. In that respect, we have some testimony from Mr. Drake that there is there's some kind of litigation pending. We don't know whether it satisfies this section 11's general provision. And this is an exchange, not a sale in any case. This is not an exchange. This is an exchange. It's not a sale. However, there is a substantial contingency in the last line of paragraph D that says that the United States also has to approve title to the property that's going to receive pursuant to paragraph 6 above. And that hasn't, that's a contingency, making this a speculative or very unknown as to whether or not this is a contract that can be enforced. Another contingency is in paragraph 9. It says that the United States is seeking necessary authorization to pay an equalization payment to level up the values of the properties of several $100,000 in this exchange. And even Mr. Drake testified that I want to read what I wrote as he was speaking. He said that there's pending litigation and it requires an act of Congress to fund. He didn't say to fund, but there is going to be an act of Congress required in order to complete this exchange. Now, as everybody knows, recent experience with the debt ceiling, sometimes that works to get an act of Congress done, but of the thousands of bills pending, most will never see the light of day, and they're speculative. It's not certain that this is an agreement that's going to go through, so it's very contingent and speculative. And there's also the contingency of the litigation and so there are at least 3 contingencies in this exchange agreement, if it's still alive. Let's see. Going through my notes here, if you will bear with me, Mr. Hearings Officer. Mr. King's testimony that this does satisfy all the code as to parking, as the hearings officer already noted. This does satisfy the definition of a hotel. It's really not necessary for it to for the hearings officer to really consider it, whether it's short-term rental also. But because it is an application for a hotel, it's stated to be a hotel. It has a restaurant area small enough that there is a condition of approval that requires that it only serve the hotel guests. If this became a world-class hotel, a destination that people drove to the top of Mount Hood for, or to the pass anyway, then that would be a problem that would be nice to have, but it's not. And, additional condition of approval that it not be advertised as an open hotel is another way to address this. Let's see.
You mean an open restaurant, I think.
Yes, an open restaurant, right, as opposed to simply a restaurant that just serves the people in the hotel. And that does, of course, address go to parking issue, but that's really not going to happen. It is meant for the people in the hotel. The 2,000 square feet is not a large restaurant for a 47 room hotel that really is in an area where, I've been to the CPO meetings in government camp, and there's really only one other place in the area to eat. So the people in the hotel need a place to eat. That's really a requirement there. I think I have addressed all of the issues that have been raised by the appellants. And we asked that the hearings officer in the de novo review approve the application in consistent with the findings of the staff and with the evidence that we have discussed today.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hearings Officer.
Mr. Trumke, who is the applicant in this case?
It's
There's a lot of similar names here. I think that's why I'm confused.
right. The landowner is Mount Hood Mount Hood Roman numeral 2 LLC.
Okay,
Not to be confused with Mount Hood Meadows LLC, which runs a ski area on the
Right.
other side of the mountain.
thank you. I think that's where I'm confused.
Yeah.
I had another question, but okay, never mind. You answered that. I do see a raised hand. I'm not going to take further testimony from the public. Everybody's had the chance to testify. I am going to hold the record open as we discussed, requested by the county. So what I'm going to do is hold it open for a week for everybody to submit new testimony and evidence. Another week for everybody to respond to that testimony and evidence, and then the applicant, it's a third week for final argument only with no new evidence. So anybody who wants to submit anything else, you can submit that in writing. I will try and get my decision out within 2 weeks after that. Let me grab my calendar, make sure we're not running into any clock issues, so to speak. And I'll also give us specific dates. 150 days is, okay, that gives us plenty of time.
Right.
Like I noted, I have to get my decision out within 150 days, which is July 24th, but that gives me plenty of time to do that. So I will, Mr. Blessing, what time does anything has to be received by the county?
It will have to be received at 4:00 p.m.
Okay.
So the end of that and it would be the Thursday,
Yes.
one week period.
Okay. So I'll hold it open for 1 week until 4:00 on June 15th for anybody to submit new testimony and evidence. That anything you want to submit has to be physically received by the county by 4:00. Either however you want to submit that, email, regular mail delivery, but you have to account for any delays. So get it in a little before 4.
Right.
The second week is just responses to whatever was submitted during the first week. No new issues can be raised in the second week. That on June 22nd, again at 4:00, anything you want to submit has to be physically received by then. And then the applicant's final argument by June 29th, again at 4 p.m. I will try and get my decision out by July 13th. In any case, I will definitely get it out before the 24th. I will send my decision to the county. County will send it to parties of record. So anybody who has testified orally or in writing, or who does so during the open record period, will be sure and receive a copy of my decision. If you don't want to testify, but just want to receive a copy, you can provide your contact info to Mr. Blessing and request that. That concludes our hearing on this item. Is there a separate Zoom link for the next hearing? Do we log off this one and start again?
I don't believe so, Steve, or actually Darcy. Yeah, sorry, Darcy.
No, you don't need to log off. If you are not part of the next hearing, you can feel free to leave, or you can stay on. It's perfectly fine.
I assume most people are interested in this one as well. We will need to promote, I think it was Mr. King, whoever
Yes,
it was.
I've got that.
Yeah. And I'm just
Mr.
writing.
Hearings Officer, would you be interested in maybe a 5-minute break?
Yes, that was my plan. I just wanted to make sure I got the dates down before I walk away from this one. But yes, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 11 o'clock. And for the next hearing regarding the river and stream conservation area. Great, thank you. Okay, this is the June 8th, 2023 hearing for case file Z, an appeal of Z0033-23-RSCA. I have to do my intro again because this is a separate file and an appeal, etc. So you've all heard this before, but I'll do it again as quickly as I can. My name is Joe Turner. I'm the county's hearings officer. I start by saying I'm not a county employee. I am licensed as an attorney and trained as a planner. I serve under contract with the Board of Commissioners. I say that so you know you're getting a somewhat independent review of the application and appeal before me today. My role as the hearings officer is to conduct the hearing and make decisions about certain land use matters in Clackamas County. In making those decisions, I have to apply the county's existing laws. I don't have the authority to vary from or change the laws. You can work with Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners to do that if you think that necessary. But this state law requires this application be judged based on the laws in effect when the application was filed. As a hearings officer, I'm to provide an unbiased decision maker, and I believe I am unbiased with regard to this application. I haven't had any pre-hearing contact with any parties regarding the substance of the application or appeal, and I don't have any interest in the subject property or the surrounding properties. Procedure will follow, same as last time. I will start by asking staff to summarize their staff report. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to present their project and respond to the appeals. Then the appellants will have the opportunity to present their appeal, respond to this testimony from staff and the applicant. If anybody else wants to testify, they may do so. Once everyone's had an initial opportunity to testify, I will close the record for everybody else, close the hearing rather. And just take response from the applicant and staff. So if anybody wants to say something, you need to make sure you say it during the initial period there. If the applicant's or staff's response includes new evidence, I will give everyone a chance to respond to the new evidence, but only in that case. Anyone with interest in the application may offer relevant oral or written testimony, should be relevant to the approval criteria, and please don't repeat yourself. It's important that you make your best case to me. My decisions are final for purposes of the county, but may be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals or LUBA. But LUBA generally will not allow new testimony and evidence on appeal. In order to raise an issue, in order to preserve your right to appeal, you or someone expressly representing you must testify orally or in writing before the close of the record. And in order to raise an issue on appeal, someone must have raised that issue before me, with enough specificity that people can understand what it is. If you need more time to prepare, you can ask me to hold the record open or continue the hearing. You must make that request before the close of the hearing today if you want me to do either of those things. But regardless, the applicant has the right to have me hold the record open for an additional week for them to submit a final argument without any new evidence. This is subject to the same 150-day deadline of July 24th. So I have to get my decision out by then. And that concludes my introduction, Mr. Blessing.
Actually, it's me, Steve.
Mr. Hansford.
Yeah,
thank you.
sorry. Yeah, Steve Henchka, senior planner with Clackamas County. Would you like me to read the opening script again?
Yeah, just in case.
Okay, all right.
Anybody else has joined us?
This public hearing will be conducted virtually using the Zoom platform. Panelists for today's hearing, which include the hearings officer, county staff, and the applicant, have both audio and video capability. Audience members who have joined the meeting will have their mics muted unless they wish to testify, in which case they will be called upon to do so by the county staff moderator. Audience members' video will not be turned on at any time. Today's hearing is being recorded as required by law. The county will make every effort to post the recording on the county website later today. There is a designated time during the hearing when it will be open for testimony. The hearings officer will make it clear when this is. If you want to provide testimony, you will utilize the raise hand feature. For attendees on PC and iPad, you have a raise hand button on the Zoom bar on the top or the bottom, depending on the device. When the moderator switches you over to provide testimony, your screen will look different for a little while. Primarily, you will see all participants' cameras, not just the one who is speaking. Staff will call upon you when it is time for you to provide testimony. Be sure to provide your name and mailing address when you begin. Once you have provided your testimony, your mic will be muted and your screen will be returned to normal. If the record is left open at the end of this hearing and you wish to submit additional written testimony, email written testimony to me at Steve, STEBE, Han, H as in Hannah, A as in Apple, N as in Nancy. So that's Steve Han at clackamas.us, or mail it to the Clackamas County Planning and Zoning Division, 150 Beaver Creek Road, Oregon City, Oregon, 97045. The staff contact email address is also available on the webpage where you found the Zoom link for today's hearing. Testimony must be received by 4 p.m. on the day the record closes. People who testify and provide their mailing address will receive a copy of the hearings officer's written decision. If you do not wish to testify but would like to receive the decision, you must provide your email or standard mailing address by email to the staff contact for the application or by entering it into the Zoom chat function during the hearing. Okay, so. All right, so again, this is appeal, and can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, it's appeal of file number Z0033-23-RSCA, which is a stream conservation area review and open space review for, in conjunction with the proposed hotel that has been discussed. Oops. Okay, so again, a location map, just another kind of version of what Mr. Blessing had provided. A copy of the tax assessor's map showing the subject lot. And then, so the Camp Creek Stream Conservation Area, basically, the applicant, as previously noted, is proposing this 47-room hotel being reviewed under the previously outlined design review decision, which is Exhibit 18. And the project is being proposed in the northerly sector of the roughly 1.38 acre property. And I've cited the exhibits here. So Camp Creek flows along the eastern and southern property lines. And these are shown on page 16 and 18 of Exhibit 11. And so Camp Creek is regulated under Ordinance Section 704 as a small type F stream with a 50-foot buffer or stream conservation area. And that is basically documented or outlined or adopted on the water protection rule classification maps for government camp. This is a copy of that map. The original map is actually quite old. It goes back to 1994. The stream has since, to the extent you can see, it has been, I believe, culverted and now flows differently than when it was originally mapped and inventoried. So in order to encroach into the 50-foot wide stream conservation area, it has to be done under subsection 704.05B. which requires consistency with the adopted economic, social, environmental, and energy or ESE analysis for the Sandy River watershed. The applicant has submitted an ESEE analysis that addresses the Sandy River ESEE analysis, along with requirements for open space disturbance. And so while there'll be some disturbance to the outer edges of Camp Creek, the stream conservation area will be restored and enhanced through planting of 64 native trees, 436 native shrubs, and native grass seed mix, thereby effectively enhancing the area of the stream conservation area that is not being disturbed. So the energy component of the ESE would be unaffected because it doesn't have anything to do with hydroelectric or energy types of facilities. This is basically a map of the encroachment of the project into the stream conservation area. You can see these these little pieces of the development encroaching. This is I need to move. Okay, so as outlined on Exhibit 11, this is the proposed restoration or mitigation plan. I'll do a little bit more detail on the planting plan for the mitigation / restoration work. So it should be noted that the site also contains some slopes of between 20 and 35%. So that was reviewed under a separate application, Z0034-23-SSR, which is included as an exhibit in terms of steep slope review. And there is also a geotechnical report for guidance on development on steep slopes. This is basically just an overview of the contours of the site, illustrating that it does contain some slopes of between 20 and 35%. So jumping around to another section of the ordinance, the site is located on the Mount Hood Community Plan map for the Government Camp Village as resource protection open space on map 10-MH-5. And also it contains hillsides of more than 20% slope as previously noted. I won't keep citing each subsection, but portions of the development are located within 50 feet of the perennial stream of Camp Creek. The site also contains wetlands and likely includes wetland recharge areas as outlined on Exhibit 11, as well as page 6 of Exhibit 9. So the applicant has obtained concurrence for their wetland delineation of the subject property from the Oregon Department of State Lands. This is basically the map that I referred to that shows the wetlands that are regulated under map 10-MH-5. This is a copy of the actual wetland delineation, having received concurrence from the Oregon Department of State Lands, outlining the wetlands here. Again, kind of jumping around back to the open space review, the site contains high priority open space in the form of the Camp Creek Stream Corridor and wetlands. It also contains second priority open space in terms of steep slopes between 20 and 35%. So under this subsection 1011.02b, commercial developments that affect wetlands are allowed subject to an ESEE analysis and when permitted by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineer and DSL. And again, the applicant is in the process of, has received concurrence of the delineation and is in the process of obtaining the necessary permits from the Corps and DSL. So the applicant has submitted an ESE analysis. Again, I'm referring to the various exhibits as I move through this. Has obtained, as noted, DSL concurrence, and again, in the process of seeking permitting from the Corps and DSL. And so basically 11% or 0.02 acres of the outer areas of the wetlands will be disturbed. So in terms of the second priority open space, applicant is utilizing development techniques under this subsection as outlined in Exhibit 2 and undergoing review under Section 1103 open space review. And so the findings and the conditions for this particular file, along with the applicant's submittal materials, demonstrate consistency with the applicable standards of Section 1103, recognizing that the project is being reviewed under stream conservation area review, design review, steep slope review, and open space and parks, and does include an ESEE analysis for the Sandy River watershed. And that concludes the presentation of the, I need to get back to my, so that concludes the presentation / overview of the project and its encroachment into the Camp Creek stream conservation area and the associated resources therein, and restoration / mitigation thereof.
Thank you, Mr. Hanska. Can you submit your PowerPoint as an exhibit as well? Just, it's got a lot of information there.
Yeah, it's an exhibit. It's exhibit. I mean, it's definitely submitted as an exhibit.
Okay,
So exhibit 20.
thanks. That's the only question I had. Thank you. Mr. Krupke, are you representing the applicant on this one as well, I assume?
Yes, I am, Mr. Hearing's officer. I'm representing Mount Hood Roman numeral 2 LLC, and the rest of the applicant, Jesus Solis listed.
Can you do your name and address again?
Thank you. I'm Ed Tromke. I'm an attorney with Jordan Ramus, 1211 Southwest Fifth Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97204. And it was Suite 2700, if I didn't say that. We concur with the findings that have been submitted by Mr. Hanska, and generally speaking, believe that we are in complete compliance with the ZDO and the DSL's requirements, and will be in compliance with the Corps' requirements as the process is completed. And I would like to call Ivy Watson, a wetland natural resources expert, who has submitted an exhibit. I want to make sure that that has been received and is in the record.
I think it's listed as Exhibit 20 for the design review. It probably has a different number for this. We'll need a different number for this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it has a different number for this one. It's submitted as exhibit 22 for this file.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Thank you. And with that, I'll call Ivy to speak.
Ms. Watson, whenever you're ready. I see your hands raised. You're unmuted, so we should be able to hear you.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you for letting me know. Nothing looked different on my end. My name is Ivy Watson, W-A-T-S-O-N. My address is 205 Southeast Spokane Street, Suite 200, Portland, Oregon, 97202. I'm the Senior Natural Resources Scientist with Harper Hoff Peterson Regelis here with the applicant. I visited the proposed hotel site multiple times with my team in the spring and summer of 2022 to complete the wetland delineation that was mentioned by the county, as well as to evaluate habitat on the site. And as was mentioned, our delineation was approved by the Oregon Department of State Lands. As you can see on our exhibits, Camp Creek runs along the eastern and southern boundary of the site, and the wetlands are located either along the creek or on the slopes above the creek within the 50-foot stream buffer. The development is located in the northern portion of the site, so it's located as far as possible from the creek and the wetlands. The impacts that will result are very small, and they're limited to the outer fringe of the resources, which allows us to preserve the core area of the creek corridor and protect that from impacts and development, and thereby to preserve the most important core habitat on the site. When we were evaluating habitat on the site, we found that it does not contain any endangered species habitat. The main species of concern on the site are resident fish in Camp Creek, and also protecting water quality for endangered fish populations that are present downstream of the site, but not at the site. The project is doing this by protecting a wide vegetated buffer between the creek and the development, and by intercepting and treating and detaining stormwater discharge from the site, as well as stormwater that drains from the roadway and onto the site. And all the stormwater will be treated to the standards that are set by NOAA Fisheries to protect endangered salmonids. During the design process, we worked really closely with the design team to ensure that all the resources are protected and enhanced as much as possible. There is some pretty innovative aspects of the design that helped minimize the footprint and minimize the impacts to Camp Creek. These included placing the parking underground, placing the stormwater retention pipes under the parking, and using a cantilevered design to reduce on the ground impacts. And as well, I should mention that there'll be walls on the downstream side of the building, which really limit the extent of grading and fill into the stream buffer area and wetlands. As a result of all these efforts, there will be no direct impacts to Camp Creek from this project, and most of the wetlands are completely avoided except for some small amount of impacts to one of the wetlands. It also really minimizes the encroachment into that 50-foot stream buffer. That we've proposed a number of on-site enhancement, which is shown in our mitigation and restoration plans that were mentioned earlier. These enhancements will include decommissioning and replanting segments of an existing unsanctioned trail system that cuts through the site and connects to the Collins Lake development. And that will include restoring a portion of that trail segment that cuts through some of the wetlands. The project is going to plant native shrubs and trees throughout the stream buffer to add some structure and resiliency to that vegetated buffer between the project and the stream, and to enhance the stream conservation area. And in accordance with state law, DSL will require that mitigation for the permanent wetland impacts be agreed to during the removal fill application process, and that this mitigation occurs before the project is constructed. And we are aware of that, and we'll make sure that that happens for this project. I want you to keep in mind that the site is located in a developed area, and it has developments all around it. It has a government camp loop cutting it off from the national forest. This really diminishes its value as a wildlife habitat. The main wildlife habitat consideration is maintaining that corridor along the creek, which we've done. It has been previously disturbed. There's a large berm of earth on the north end that appears to have been pushed there decades ago when they constructed the roadway. That's where the hotel is going to be located. So that's a good spot for that. The trees on the site we found are relatively young, except for a few large trees close to the creek. These larger trees are going to be protected. And overall, there are important resources on the site that need to be protected and enhanced, but this design does do that. From each ecological point of view, it's a reasonable location to put an infill development with a design such as this that minimizes impacts to the creek corridor and preserves core habitat. So that is all I have at this time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Anybody else from the applicant?
No, Mr. Hearings Officer, we will reserve some time for rebuttal, but other than that, we're prepared to listen to the appellant.
Okay. Anybody who wants to testify on behalf of the appellants, then you go ahead and raise your hand now. Is any of the appellants? There we go. Mr. Siegel, Mark Siegel.
There, can you hear
There we
me?
go. Now I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Mark Siegel. Last name is Siegel. My address is 1911 Northeast Thompson Street in Portland, 97212.
And which appellant are you representing?
I'm representing myself as a
Okay.
property owner adjacent.
Thank you.
Okay. I suppose the first thing I want to do, Steve, sorry, what's your Steve, how do you pronounce your last name, please?
Henchka.
Henchka. There was an error in one of his slides. And I'm looking at slide, I don't know, is it 15 of 16 or something like that? And what I'm looking at here, it's this slide. I don't know if that helps. And there's a slight misquote of the law. Okay. What Mr. Henchka said is per ordinance subsection 101102B, commercial developments such as the proposed hotel that affect wetlands shall be allowed subject to an ESEE analysis. And there's a small mistake in there, but it's significant. If you look at ordinance 101102 B, it says high priority open space shall be preserved outright, except commercial or industrial developments affecting wetlands or significant natural areas may be allowed. So instead of shall be allowed, it should read may be allowed. Small but significant. Okay. Any questions about that?
Nope, I appreciate the clarification.
Okay. All right. So this has been an interesting process. I have a renewed appreciation for what people go through to do a development and to protect a development or protect an area. I have looked at zoning and development ordinances, the Oregon Administrative Rules, Mount Hood Community Plan, Government Camp Open Space Management District. They all emphasize the importance of maintaining the integrity of the natural resources and the interconnectedness of wetlands and streams and the natural habitat. And I just want to emphasize that as I get started here. Okay. I'm going to do a screen share as well. And all right.
Before I forget, I'll ask you to submit this as an exhibit as well after the hearing, whether or not it's held open. I'll get you can just go ahead and submit it. It will be an exhibit because we're reviewing it.
Okay. If I can figure out how to do that, I certainly will.
You can just send it to Mr. Hanska. He'll make it an exhibit himself. But
yeah,
okay. I like having this in front of me when I'm trying to write.
Yeah. All right. So let's get started. Appeal. I got a couple of photos, won't take long, but I wanted to put this in there because, well, even in the terms of Ms. Watson just said, this is a diminished wildlife habitat, or, you know, it's not important. It's important. It's important to me. It's important to a lot of people. It's beautiful. The development is going to go in below Mount Hood here on the hillside back in here. You can see that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a trail going all the way around that lake and through the property. There are historical signage placed along the trail. This is a picture of a wetland, either on the property or right in the vicinity. This is a photo of Camp Creek going through the property and just the wooded property. It's enjoyed by a lot of people, and I want to see it preserved to the extent that it should be preserved. Okay, so why the application should be denied. My first point was the design does not account for snow removal and stockpiling. And I think I would be correct in saying that's been addressed in the previous hearing. All right. My second point is the ESEE, I want to call it a report or an analysis, is inadequate. And finally, there's vegetation damage in the setback area. I'm calling the setback area, I might say buffer zone, I might say the stream conservation area. All right. So again, the Mount Hood Community Plan requires that, and I'm going to skip that. And the ESE is inadequate. I want to look at a few Oregon administrative rules regarding the decision process. It says local government shall develop a program to achieve goal 5. And I'm having trouble reading it because I can see all the photos of you fine folks off to the right. But the important part that I've emphasized here is the ESEE consequences that could result from a decision. And as I'll discuss later, this report does not look at all the consequences that could result. Determine the impact area. Local government shall determine the proper impact area that could adversely affect the identified resource. And finally, analyze the ESEE consequences that could result from decisions. All right. So keeping those things in mind, I'm going to get to my discussion of this particular ESEE analysis. Columbia Steel versus City of Portland. I found this case. In conclusion, we hold that the Goal 5 rules require that an ESEE contain enough information on impacts that resource sites and conflicting uses have on each other to permit the responsible jurisdiction to have reasons why decisions are made. The reasons cannot exist if the local government's ESEE study was never sufficiently detailed. And I'm going to discuss about that detail in a minute. And finally, as noted, the end result of the process is supposed to be a balancing. And that balancing such that it occurs is not the proper balancing. So I'm going back to, I want to discuss this ESEE. First, it was submitted by the applicant. And I can understand, you know, maybe the county doesn't have all the resources in the world to go do an ESEE study out on the site. But I don't think this ESEE study cuts the mustard, really. It must include consequences that could result. So we know that wetlands are interconnected. We know that damage to one wetland could cause damage to surrounding wetlands. And there's really not an analysis of this in detail that's sufficient to support this ESEE. Secondly, the new hotel could result in fewer bookings in other lodgings. So this wasn't given really much detail at all. There are consequences for a new hotel going in here. And just like if a Home Depot goes into a new town, you would look at the consequences, positive and negative, of that Home Depot. The consequences for small hardware stores in the area are probably going to be negatively impacted. So the consequences to the other hotels, Airbnbs, lodgings in the area, none of that's analyzed at all. All right, so this is lacking the sufficient analysis of consequences that could occur. All right. Secondly, the impact zone. The impact zone should include all of the wetlands, not just the wetlands that are included on the subject property, but those wetlands also go into off of the property. The stream impacts the wetlands impact the stream, the wetlands impact other wetlands, and they all feed into Collins Lake. And that is the kind of impact area that needs to be included and addressed. And instead, what is happening is it's just looking at the subject property and it concludes everything's going to be fine. And I don't think that's sufficient. Speaking of sufficient, the ESEE analysis needs to be sufficiently detailed, and it's not. There's mention of amphibians. What amphibians? Where are they? How might they be impacted? There's a conclusion that a hotel is needed in this area, but there's no details about vacancy rates, other lodgings. There's just this blanket conclusion that a hotel here is a public good, and there's really no sufficient evidence to support that conclusion. All right, finally on the balancing. This is, I would say, given the balance of things so far, environmentally, I think the balance is in favor of not allowing the intrusion into the buffer zone. Economically, I don't know. It's a wash. We haven't seen the proper analysis. Socially, whether there's a public good caused by this hotel going in, I really haven't seen the evidence for that either. But there's something else that gets to me, and that is, I think the balancing is wrong. So it seems to me that what they're balancing is a hotel on one hand and this intrusion on the other hand. And that's not the proper balancing. So I'll give you an example. I like to use metaphors, Mr. Turner, so maybe this will help. Let's say the applicant is wanting to put in a 45-foot swimming pool. And if he doesn't get this intrusion into the buffer zone, he's going to have to build a 40-foot swimming pool. So the benefit is the extra 5 feet. It's not the whole swimming pool. So the benefit here on the plus side will be, I don't know, the applicant gets 47 rooms, right? And if he doesn't get the intrusion, I don't know, maybe he gets 40 rooms or 20 rooms. I don't know. But the balancing is not correct here. All right. So that's what I got to say about the ESEE analysis. It's insufficient. I think they need to go back to the drawing board and talk about the consequences that could result, broaden the impact area that's looked at as far as the wetlands go, and get some more sufficient detail so that there is sufficient evidence to support a finding that it balances in favor of the applicant. I want to share my screen one more time. All right. I can skip that and that and that and that. I got some questions about this, and I guess I'm hoping that we can have a discussion about it. This is the property line.
Mm-hmm.
And the blue line, I think, is the stream, this dark blue line.
Mm-hmm.
And this light blue line is the buffer zone or setback
Mm-hmm.
line. And all these X's up here are trees removed, and these red X's are trees removed within the buffer zone. And then I can't really read this. I did a photo, a screenshot to get this exhibit, but it talks about the impact. I can barely read it. It says percent of the SCA disturbance within the project limit. And it talks about the disturbance and the total of permanent disturbance and temporary disturbance, and it's adding up to about 16%. And first, I would question that. I don't know how you're gonna, maybe we could have, I could use a little clarity. I mean, they're gonna be drilling, they're gonna be putting in pilings along here, right? And this is a sloped hillside, and I think there's gonna need to be some kind of a bump up to the level of the parking, and maybe a wall. What's the wall gonna look like? And I'm just wondering if I could get a little clarity on that so that I can further comment. Is that something that can happen, Mr. Turner?
I'll give the applicant an opportunity to respond, but it is in the architectural renderings. Everything is in the record. That's what I have to rely on, is what is in the record. If it's inadequate to demonstrate compliance, then I would have to deny it. But I can't make them do anything, if it's the short answer. But I will ask that they will get the chance to respond, and if they provide any new evidence, I'll give you a chance to respond to that new evidence.
Okay. Does anyone want to respond now?
I generally allow everybody to testify so that the applicant can respond to everything at once.
Okay. Well, I'm a little suspect that there's not going to be more of an intrusion into this area. Let me just
During
note.
construction.
I'm sorry, say again.
You mean during construction?
Yeah, during construction. There's going to be heavy equipment in here. There's going to be workers walking around. I don't really know it. I'm not a construction guy. So I'm a little bit suspect of this.
Generally, they will be required to put in erosion control or other fencing to demarcate these boundaries where they can and can't go with equipment and workers, et cetera. I'll ask the applicant to, that's what I'm assuming they would propose, but I'll ask them to clarify that. But I understand your concern. I can see exactly where you're going. I can picture what your concern is.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. And just to note, these areas, this is sort of high in pink. These are wetlands on the site. This is a wetland that's going under the structure and is right next to the structure. Okay. All right. Next up. This is a picture of the structure, and we've got, I think what I heard was about 5 stories high. It looks like about 5 stories.
4 stories in a basement is the definition, but yes.
Yeah.
5 floors.
Okay. All right. So I want to talk about what happens when snow slides off a roof. This is a nearby building. Took this photo this week. And this area comes down straight from the side of the building and goes out to about here. And that is between 20 and 25 feet. And you know what's growing there? Nothing. Here, different building. Snow's still there this week. That's about 30 feet out. Again, nothing. And again here, 25 to 30 feet. Nothing growing there. Now you can imagine you've got all these new plantings. You're a new shrub. You're a new oak or a new cedar tree or something just planted. and you've got 500 pounds of icicles and snow sloughing off the roof, crashing down on all these nice new plantings that they've used to mitigate, crashing down on the wetland, and destroying everything in the process. And that's what's going to happen with this design. Here's what I would do. I would do a line, we'll say 25 feet approximately from the edge of the building. And in this area, we're going to call it the dead zone. That is the dead zone.
Mhm.
All right. Preservation of vegetation. All right, the ordinance 70407, vegetation preservation requirements, a minimum of 75% of the setback area shall be preserved with native vegetation. This is a Luba case involving a situation very similar to this. It says it requires that a minimum of 75% of the 50-foot setback area shall be preserved with native vegetation. We got a problem here with this design, with what's going on. All right, on conclusion, deny the application or require a new ESEE and require a plan that doesn't destroy over 35% of the vegetation. And
The
that's
35%, your 35% number, I'm assuming is the
That's my
roof
side.
fall impact area.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's my rough estimate, obviously.
Yeah, no, I that's what I understood. I just want to make sure I knew where that number was coming from.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wrapping up my note, but if anybody else, I've got more raised hand. Mr. Siegel, if you'll click on the raise hand, so yours goes away. Mr. Koffenberg, it looks like you're next. Give me 1 second. Okay. Okay, Mr. Koffenberg.
Mr. Turner, all right, Jeff Koffenberg, since this is another meeting, Koffenberg, Kaufenberg, 3451 Oak Crest Drive, Forest Grove, Oregon, 97116. I am president of Grand Lodge at Collins Lake and an owner at Grand Lodge, Collins Lake. I'd like to thank Mr. Siegel for his concise reporting on that, showing Collins Lake, which is located in the backside of the Grand Lodge's development there. Ivy Watson stated at one point that there was no direct impact from, I think she's talking about the construction of the building itself. What Mark brought up and what we have seen is that due to the size of this building, the snow shed will have major impacts on the wetlands, Camp Creek, and the vegetation. We've seen snow shed come off Grand Lodge and go at least 35, 40, maybe even 50 feet after being sloughed off the building. I believe this new construction is 80 some feet high at its highest point, which is even higher than the Grand Lodges from what I can tell. So the snow shed going back into that area of the wetlands is even have a greater impact than it does anyplace else. What I'm curious, the effects of the building on Collins Lake also. So the creek coming in dumps into Collins Lake, the silt and all the sand and everything coming in is going to fill that lake even more than it has been filled over the past decade or so. Migratory stormwater down there as well. I don't think they're accounting for anything on that.
I two questions before you. Where's the silt and sand coming from that is not coming from now?
With more snow impact being sloughed off?
Because of the snow impact.
Correct.
How is that causing more?
It's going to impact into the soil, into the dirt at a higher speed and a lot more
Okay,
weight.
so
naturally
bust
falling.
it loose, if you will.
Correct.
Okay, let me write that down. Then you had said something else and I had a question. So
Okay. Has part of this report.
just a minute, Mr. Koppenberg.
Okay.
So what I'm picturing is spring, most of the snow is gone, but you've still got a bunch on the roof. It comes down, hits that ground, knocks it loose. You got snow and sand, or snow, excuse me, silt and sand into the creek. That's what you're arguing.
All through the season. I mean, it's going to
Yes.
start at the beginning of the season before there's.
Yeah, it's gonna be more of an impact when early and late when the ground's exposed. But
Correct.
okay, great. I understand that. And then you said something else at the end there, and I had a question about what you meant.
I'm just wondering about creating the environmental hazards for the Sandy River watershed as it flows down farther too.
From the same impact. Okay,
Mhm.
great.
Mr. Siegel covered the wetlands restoration pretty well. Yeah, and I guess the question would be is how is Clackamas County going to assess the effectiveness of this restoration process?
How's the county gonna, I missed the word, assess, thank you.
Assess the effectiveness of the restoration.
I just blanked out for a second there. I
That's
know
okay.
exactly what you were trying to say, but I couldn't get the word into my note.
And other than that, I think Mr. Siegel covered about everything else that I was going to talk about as well.
Great, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Is there anybody else who'd like to say anything about this application and appeal? Please raise your hand now. We've got a couple of attendees, make sure they're seeing any raised hands. We have, okay, Ms. Piska, we'll get to you in just a minute, but Mr. Hanska, there's one person that's on the phone. Did you say how to raise your hand when on the phone? If they wanted to do that? Mr. Hanska? You're muted if you're talking. Mr. Hanska, you're muted.
So actually, no, I did not say yet that how to raise your hand if you're on the phone.
I think it's *9, but it's star something.
See if I have the
I tell you what, you find that, we'll go ahead and I'll take Ms. Piska's
Okay.
testimony. If you've, and we'll come back to that issue. So if the person on the phone wants to testify, we'll give you a chance to do that, but as soon as we find out how to raise your hand on the phone. Ms. Piska, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Pamela Pliska.
Pliska, sorry, I missed the L.
Okay, Pliska. My address is 4111 Southwest 57th Avenue, Portland, Oregon, 97221. And I just want to get on the record. I would like to reiterate and thank Mr. Siegel for his fine presentation of many of the things that I was concerned about as well. And just reiterate the fact that I believe most of his exhibits and the pictures that he took were probably in and around buildings that were already there that are much lower in height than this proposed building. And as a result, the snow shed off of a higher building is going to shoot out. And the building is literally 50 feet away from the Camp Creek. And I believe the snow shed is going to shoot out directly into Camp Creek from the height of this building. So I really wanted to emphasize that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Pliska, which appellant are you representing?
I am also representing the Grand Lodges. and the
Grand Lodge,
treasurer
okay.
of that organization.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pliska. If you'll click on, there we go. Is there anybody else wants to say anything about this application? Okay, not seeing any. Mr. Trumpkin.
We'll be asking Ivy to Ivy Watson to speak again in just a moment, but I want to lead out with a couple of thoughts that the first is that it's too bad that Grand Lodges didn't have to go through an ESEE analysis like this, because it does seem that a lot of the silt and gravel people are saying go into the lake, Collins Lake now, are from existing buildings. And to the extent anything comes down from the road, the applicant here is going to be mitigating that by slowing down the flows. And there will be treatment of the waters as they come down through the applicant's site. So to the extent they're not from the Grand Lodges, but from Loop Road, things will be improving, not getting worse. But maybe the Grand Lodges, maybe Mr. Siegel ought to look close to home and see what he's doing.
But that application is gone. I mean, it's been approved. It's not something I get to consider. So those impacts, if they're occurring, are occurring. It's this one we have to concentrate on.
It's only with a little regret that I say that.
Sure.
In terms of the impact on the wetlands incursion, if you look at the photograph, which is it's sheet number LA1, is the mitigation and restoration planning areas, has the edges of the mitigation area. This is a tall building in large part because of the avoiding the 50-foot buffer to the stream, reducing the number of units, as Mr. Siegel suggests, would reduce the height of the building and not the footprint of it. And if you look to the west where the parking is, you might get away with a few fewer parking spaces, but that doesn't change the incursion into the wetland, into the sensitive lands, the 50-foot buffer at all. All of the issue appears much closer to the building and is impossible to avoid unless you were to scale it down to 6 units in a hotel, which is completely uneconomic. And that sort of an analysis is not what an ESEE requires at all. Mr. Siegel is misstating what the ESEE analysis really requires. He's raised his suspicion that heavy equipment will intrude into the 50-foot buffer, and Ms. Watson will speak to that in a minute. Let's see. Yeah, let me turn this over to Ms. Watson for a moment and come back to me. Thank you.
Ms. Watson, whenever you're ready.
All right, so there were a number of issues raised that I want to talk about a little bit. One of them was the issues of impacts to offsite wetlands in Collins Lake. Collins Lake is located downslope of our site on the other side of Camp Creek. So the water that is in the wetlands in our site, it discharges to Camp Creek. I certainly agree that Camp Creek itself has an impact on the health of Collins Lake. So that water going into Camp Creek, we worked to make sure that the water would continue to feed Camp Creek and that the storm water from the site would be treated so that the water going into Camp Creek after passing through the site is clean. And we also worked with the stormwater system to make sure that the water would be detained, which means that rather than just dumping all the stormwater straight into the creek, we detain it in pipes and then release it slowly, more the way that would occur in a natural setting. This helps reduce the impact to Camp Creek and maintain the natural hydrology that feeds Collins Lake. We also ensured that the outfalls from the stormwater system are on our site and are going to be located and contain dispersal mechanisms so that there's not erosion from those outfalls, and that the water stays on the site and either flows to Camp Creek or infiltrates in that buffer in between Camp Creek and the discharge point. So essentially all that does is maintain the current hydrology system that feeds those wetlands that are of concern downslope, off-site, and in some cases even improves that situation by treating some of the runoff that currently runs from the road across our site and directly into Camp Creek without being treated, which will be intercepted and treated by this project. So although I believe there is discussion about the on-site water in our ESEE, basically summarizing everything I just said. So we did not completely leave off-site wetlands out. And as I mentioned before, Camp Creek is the main concern on the site. It flows obviously downstream to where there are endangered salmonid populations and eventually to the Sandy River, which is, again, that all comes back to stormwater management and ensuring that that's done to the best degree possible, which we have done. So I would dispute Mr. Siegel's claim that we didn't consider offsite wetlands and offsite resources in our ESEE. Another point was about the construction zone, the impact that construction would have around the edges of the building. We, HHPR and the development team often work with projects that have sensitive resources on site, and I will acknowledge that it takes a lot of care during construction to stage the project appropriately to protect those resources. That will all be done and it will all be required by the permits that we get from the Department of State Lands as well and from the Army Corps, and by this permit as well. And during construction, that will be required to demarcate the sensitive areas that nobody can enter, to protect them with appropriate best management practices. The construction staging will occur in such a way, and I don't know exactly what it's going to be like, but typically we do something like put in that wall of working from the north end of the site down slope to put in the wall and then work backwards or something, stage it in a way that reduces the need for large equipment to get into that area that Mr. Siegel was concerned about on the downslope side. So it is possible and will be important for this project to stage construction to keep the construction impact to what is shown on the exhibit. And then the other important point that was brought up is the snowfall from the roof. Mr. Siegel showed us some pictures of the dead zone around the other lodges where snowfall occurs. The big difference that I saw between the pictures that he showed and our site is that, as you can see in the exhibit from our site that he was marking up, the zone where the snow is going to fall and our site has mature conifers in it. It's not bare, as was shown in the pictures. So those little shrubs that he was talking about that we're going to be planting as part of the mitigation, they're going to be under a existing mature canopy that will provide some buffer from that snow. And similarly, there is a wide strip with many mature conifer trees between the lodge and Camp Creek. So there's not a clear path for snow coming from the roof to land right in Camp Creek, as the other appellant was concerned would happen. So that, once again, the importance of maintaining that vegetated buffer of mature native vegetation that's adapted to a snow situation, also already has a mature canopy in place. It will add a layer of protection that wasn't present in the pictures that we saw, where the snow was just falling straight onto the understory layer.
But if you've got a large quantity of snow coming off a roof, hitting those trees, and isn't there potential for damage to those trees, breaking the branches, et cetera, over time? And so it impacts what's there, and it also is going to reduce their buffer effect.
Yeah, there may be impact to the branches of the trees, but they also buffer the resources below them. And I mean, these trees are impacted by, storms. They're impacted by snowfall during the winter anyway.
Yeah, but this is a lot of weight all at once. It's a different impact, and I'm not sure that I don't know, I'm not an expert, but that they're adapted to that kind of impact, the way they are to storms and regular snowfall.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, but a certain amount of branch loss is normal for a mature forest such as this.
But is this going to cause more than, this going to increase it? That's something that's not really addressed.
And as similarly, talking about siltation and sand to Collins Lake, there is a mature, a perennial vegetated buffer. So there's vegetation there during all seasons. It loses its leaves, but there's perennial shrubs densely in the understory. And the roots of the trees, it's not just bare ground that the snow is going to be hitting. So as far as protecting the ecological function of that site, maintaining that perennial vegetated buffer to the extent that we have done is going to really alleviate that issue, more so than occurs at some of the existing developments where there are currently either developments right next to Collins Lake or a creek or a wetland, or lawns coming up to the edge of those that don't provide the same kind of perennial cover that really filters out that silt and sand. So that is all that I have right now in terms of the ecological issues. I'm not sure if somebody else on my team wants to speak to the benefits of the project.
Got another raised hand from Mr. Lessler, so
Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Lessler?
I totally.
Yes, thank you. Brian Lessler, Lessler, PDG Construction. I'm at 5200 Southwest Meadows Road, Suite 200, Lake Oswego, Oregon, 97034. I wanted to address the issue of snow buildup. Both the applicant and I have spent many decades visiting and skiing on Mount Hood, and we're quite familiar with snow buildup in the region. I was skiing on Mount Hood before Collins Lake was built, or the Grand Lodges. So very familiar with the conditions up there. One of the mitigation concepts that we've discussed, and we discussed it in the previous hearing with respect to snow buildup on the driveways and parking lot, was a desire to have a hydronic system that would eliminate or mitigate or minimize, I should say, the snow buildup on the driveways and the parking lot. Similarly, in the roof structure, we've discussed a heated roof concept, which would prevent massive snow buildup on the roof, and therefore the shed issues that have been raised as concerns by Mr. Siegel and others. So I think, we're aware of the concern. It's a concern for us because it's a management issue, an operations concern. I think we have a very good plan to mitigate that problem. So that's all I have to say on that.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lessler. Mr. Drobke.
Yeah, Mr. Hearing's officer, I am using my older iPad and it seems not to be charging properly.
No.
It should fall off would you treat that as a request to give me a few minutes to read?
Absolutely.
Thank
Yes,
you very much.
I appreciate the heads up.
Yeah, well, I'd hate to just disappear. Let's see, just a couple more points here. The applicant's ESEE responded to a county ESEE, and that is something that is just not, was improperly brought up earlier on by the appellants. And there is no expert evidence of impacts on the wetlands and stream or lake. All of the expert testimony to this point has been that these matters are being and have been addressed by this application, and that the stream corridors functions will probably be better after the fact by having treated or slowed down the water that's running off the site, running off the road, and treating the site water, those sorts of things. And in terms of those dead zone pictures, we don't know what's going on with those buildings. There very well may be weed control measures going on around them. People might be, potentially spraying there. Those were just some random pictures that were taken without any sort of support for them. There's no way we can respond to them. We don't know what the heck they are, and they're not really properly identified. But as Mr. Lessler just said, the snowfall can be mitigated by heated roofs or other measures.
Are you proposing that? Because if you're not proposing that, those impacts are likely to occur. And as was noted, that the ESE requires you consider likely impacts.
Maybe evidence there.
Yeah, we may want to discuss that. We're going to ask for time to respond.
Yeah. Because that does seem like an issue, especially hitting the trees, taking out the limbs, covering up the vegetation close there, and creating what was referred to as a dead zone. So I would like some more information about that.
Right, and obviously those pictures had emotional impact, but the term dead zone itself.
Yeah, I understand all that, but it's an issue I didn't see considered before, because I could see how it is. I've been up there a lot too, and I know how the snow accumulates near buildings, just from
And so
observation as I'm walking around.
we will address all of that in the follow-on to this.
Okay.
So we are requesting that. Let's see, I'm still at 2%, and my staff here is madly trying to get speakers set up on another computer here. I apologize for the noise in the background.
That's okay.
Let's see. Yeah, I think that will be the end of our presentation, other than having requested the 7 day.
Okay, you want 7 days is adequate to provide the reason. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, with that, Mr. Siegel, I see you raised hand, but I've taken testimony from the public, the appellants. I'm not going to take more at this time. You can submit anything you want during the open record. But I'm going to do the same thing as I did with the last one. I'll hold it open for a total of 3 weeks. First week until 4 p.m. Grab my calendar. Today's the 8th, so first until June 15th for anybody to submit new testimony and evidence, including the applicant's response to the issues that have been raised. Until the 22nd for anybody to respond to whatever was submitted during that first week. Again, that second week is limited to responses to whatever was submitted. No new issues can be raised. And then until the 29th of June for the applicant alone to submit a final argument without any new evidence. I'll try and get my decision out on this one as well by the 13th of July, in no case later than the 24th, because that's the 150-day deadline. And anything that you submit has to be received by the county by 4 p.m. So that's what we're going to do. That concludes our hearing. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hearing's officer.
Thank you.